Hello and welcome to the 32nd edition of Half Hour, a podcast starring me, John Paulo Giudice, as your host. In today's episode, I will discuss technology as a public good with Sudhanshu Kadre. Thank you very much for coming on the show. I hope I didn't butcher it too much. I believe me, I know my last name is a mouthful, so I get it. But just to kind of start off, tell us a little about yourself, like what you're doing here in Prague, and maybe what your background is, and then we can jump right into the topic.
Perfect. Firstly, thank you so much for having me on.
Of course.
I understand my name is a bad thing to pronounce for a lot of people from the West, I guess so. But yeah, about me, I came to Prague mostly for study purposes. As you know, I'm studying in Charles University. I'm doing international security.
Oh, okay.
So that was my primary motivation. My background is a little bit different. I'm a chemical engineer in my bachelor's, but I wanted to pursue a little bit in terms of international politics and international affairs.
Okay, very good.
Yeah, that is the reason I got interested in technology and security per se. And I had a little bit of a tech background from a computer science perspective. So that is my academic background. Right now I'm studying international security with a minor in technology and security at Charles University, Faculty of Social Sciences. But professionally, I've been working in cybersecurity at National Netherlands. We call it the NN Group. It's one of the few largest insurance providers in Netherlands. And it has business units across Europe, all around 11 countries or so. And at my office in Prague, we provide cybersecurity services and security services to all of these business units. So that is why I got interested in, how we are basically using technology as a public good for people that they don't even know they're using the technology as a public good.
Right, and one thing that jumps out to me is when I was younger, I was in high school. We were still using pen and paper. We had some computer labs, obviously. We did some work there, but all I can think about is how I spent a lot of time self-educating on, geography, astronomy, history, using YouTube.
Yeah, exactly.
Using YouTube documentaries, and people would create content. Sometimes it would be even more specific than you could find in a documentary. Documentaries are great, but as you know, some of them are very not shallow, but they kind of overview everything. Whereas maybe I wanted to look at what was happening.
Specific.
Yeah, what was happening in late 1914 in this part of the world. That's it. You can find that on YouTube, which I think is great. But that's just something that jumps out to me.
No, exactly.
But I know there's so many more connotations.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. The amount of information that we have in open source platforms, that it completely boggles me, because right now, as you just said, in terms of self-education, there is actually no limit. So from that point of view, a self-education point of view, the amount of information that people are consuming on a daily basis is what actually prompted me to correlate it as a public good.
Yeah.
People don't even know how ubiquitous technology has become. It's like a day-to-day basis. That is the reason. So outside my work, I'm really active in the Web3 space, blockchain, NFTs, smart contracts, and AI, and metaverse as well, because these are the technological disruptors that are bringing the public good nature of technology way closer to human beings, even if most of the people don't know the basic understanding of these technologies.
Now, when someone says Web3, I have a hard time picturing what to think. And I'm saying it also for the audience, because it can be very... a lot of the new terms that you find in every field, but this one specifically can be very, trying. So for the, in layman's terms, Web3 is... What is it all about?
So when anybody is talking about Web3, they're not talking about the field itself, but it's kind of a hierarchical model. So when you take Web 1, Web 1 was the basic internet, which was created by the US government, like the .com bubble.
Now, is that... I know that the original internet, the very original, was for U.S. scientists to communicate across the country scientific findings. Is that's Web 1?
Yeah, I think so. If I'm not wrong, it was called DARPA.
Okay.
So it was created by the U.S. government, but once it became public, it became a public good, open source. So the U.S. government essentially, at one point of time, they couldn't control it. Yeah. So at one point of time, they'd be like, okay, let the reins take over. the public take the reins, because like they couldn't actually how do you say, manage the entire internet at that point of time.
It was just kind of like a hands-off
Yeah,
approach.
they would be like, okay, cool. Now it's out of our hands. Now we cannot regulate it, because the amount of active nodes on the internet was so many, they couldn't regulate it.
I see.
So that would be the Web 1, the dot-com bubble that was like famous in the 90s.
Okay, and then that's when it kind of shifts into Web 2?
Yeah.
At some point in the 90s or a little
No,
later?
no. So Web 2 essentially from an internet model. So when you take about Web 1, it's mostly about exchanging information.
Okay.
Looking up the information on the internet. You have Amazon, you have YouTube, all these information-based things. Web 2 is when internet becomes user-centric. So this
Okay.
is where social media comes into
Okay,
place.
so that's Web 2.
Yeah, this is Web 2. So still in Web 1 and Web 2, the entire system is centralized.
Okay.
Because you have like these centralized regulators that are looking at your traffic. Like anybody can monitor anybody's traffic online, even
Yep.
though there are certain methods that you can actually anonymize it. But to a certain point, anybody can look at it because the system is centralized. There are
Right.
intermediaries in place. Web 3 is in which the entire system becomes decentralized and your anonymity is increased. And one more thing a lot of people talk about is your ownership of data. Yeah.
Okay, so all right. So a question I have: when you say moving from centralized to decentralized, I know in Web 2 the centralized nature is like you have these massive drives
Yep.
where you have like the cloud
Yep.
basically,
Yep.
right? But when we're talking about what kind of infrastructure is decentralized, like what does that mean? That each person kind of like these cloud operations are not so much in one place, but it's kind of like spread out, but. Like what more specifically? Like what am I trying to get at here?
Exactly. So the analogy that you used is like brilliant. When you talk about Web 2 centralization, you have like these data warehouses that are either on premises or on cloud. But the main point is all of them are regulated by a central authority. Like one person has like one switch.
Okay.
If the person switches the switch, like turns on the turns
All
off the
those
switch,
drives can turn off.
exactly, because
Right.
there is a single point of control, and because of that, there's a single point of failure. For example, if I'm a hacker, I want to hack like in a cloud-based document. So if I can go to that single point, I can do whatever I want with it. So the difference between Web 3 is, as you stated, it's decentralized and the control is distributed amongst the nodes.
So I know that with some of the digital coin transactions, like Bitcoin and the others, I know that you can essentially. Someone explained it to me this way: is that like let's say I want to pay. Let's say that person A wants to pay person B 10 Bitcoin for something, which is actually a lot, by the way. It's a lot. I know you know, but so person A wants to pay person B 10 Bitcoin, and then I can facilitate the transaction using my hardware, or is it not?
No, it's exactly like that. So what happens with Bitcoin specifically, because like it's a different blockchain. It was like the first, it's the most popular blockchain for financial transactions. So what happens is, like in normal Web 2 standpoint, you have intermediaries who are actually facilitating the transaction and they're getting the money out of it, transaction fees.
Yeah.
So what Web 3 does, like what Bitcoin does, is if you're a node, if you're an active node, if you have a block on the blockchain of Bitcoin, you can actually do that. And to do that, you get two things. Firstly, you get the mining reward once you first own the block, that's Bitcoins. And the transaction fee is if you're helping somebody else make the transaction, you get the fee out of it. You don't have any information regarding why is it being done. You just have two addresses. You have wallet 1 address of person A, you have wallet 2 address of person B, and you know this transaction is being happening. So you know this is an authentic transaction. And in the future, if somebody wants to validate that transaction, they'll basically look at your history, say, okay, the transaction happened on your block, and then you'll be like, okay, I validate it. It's an authentic transaction. But you don't know anything about the transaction.
I know nothing about it.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm just there to facilitate.
Facilitate it and get the money off of it.
I think this is good. I think that when you have anything decentralized, I like. I like it when people have more control over their lives in this way. All I can think about was there were protests in China. Something was going on.
Okay.
It was recent. It wasn't too long ago, but I know that the people protesting got around the central government, like being able to read the messages between them.
Okay.
They used like AirDrop on their iPhones, or they used some way of getting data from one phone to the other without even
The
getting on the
government
network.
knowing, yeah.
So I feel like these things are great. And this can apply in the U.S. and Europe as well. I mean, it's good to see like people being able to kind of like take back their data.
Exactly.
And I feel like that's super important.
No, similarly, if you take India, for example, if you take Iran, for example, where there is an ability of the internet, sorry, of the government to actually shut down the internet. Because if you take United States, for example, United States amongst the big power has like the only one exception in which they created the internet, and the amount of active nodes that are in the US, they don't even know. So if they want to shut down the internet, the US cannot, but Russia can and has. North Korea has only 6 ports. So they know everything that is coming inside.
They can shut it down if they want
can
to.
shut it down, they can monitor every single thing. Russia has also shut down the internet. So in these kind of scenarios, like the Iranian protest was the best example in which the government actually shut the internet down. So when you talk about Bitcoin networks, if you talk about any blockchain networks that are being used for sharing information, they cannot do that.
So it seems like the U.S. is kind of like the best spot to be when it comes to the internet, because you can't, they literally can't shut it down. Like they don't know how many. Yeah. Okay. So
they cannot shut down the internet for United States of America.
I feel like this is a very, I don't want to just say American thing, but it's kind of like we take that as very like, okay, the government should not have the power to shut the internet down, and we won't give it to them. And it's just an example of like the free kind of market we live in the
That's
US.
true, because a lot of people criticize the US government for a lot of things that are like justifiable, but in terms of how do you saying the user power on the internet, the amount of freedoms that people have on the internet in the United States is the most. That is the reason when you talk about these kind of controversies about using TikTok, because like a lot of countries have all officially banned it as well. Like in India we banned it like in the beginning only. Like TikTok has always been banned in India, like after a while. But now a lot of other countries are like gaining understanding, okay, some information might be mined. That is why United States of America, the amount of power that people have in about tracking who's checking their data, who's using their data for what. That is the reason why Web3, blockchain, Bitcoin, all these movements started are most popular in the United States of America.
So if, let's say that there are states that I'm trying to think, like if they shut the internet down, there's going to be people within these states that will have some access at some point, right? Like even like wealthier parts of society might be able to. I know that a lot of countries block sites too. I mean, like North Korea and China have the Great Firewall going. But I guess my point here is like if the U.S. because I know Joe Biden's been talking about this a bit, but he was talking about he wanted to ban TikTok.
Okay.
He wanted to make it not usable in the United States.
Okay, I didn't know about that, but okay.
Yeah, he was trying. My question is like, how would that even work? I know a lot of people have VPNs, myself included, but let's say you have an iPhone and the App Store, the App Store is on your American iPhone and it's registered in the US.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, like, how would that even work?
So in terms of blocking applications, when so this is mostly politics. When a politician says that, okay, cool, we'll block it. So what the internet regulating authorities can do is, as you said, like every US-based IP, any type of connection towards the App Store, you can like ban it in the App Store, the US version of the App Store. But the thing is, as long as you have a VPN, you can actually access it, because a lot of people used to do that the same way in India. So there's another method as well. So you can actually download the application directly from the internet. You don't only have to do it through the App Store. You have a direct, we call it like SDK. It's called a software development kit. So you can download the application through the internet, and you can use your VPN to basically access the application. So when a lot of politicians say that we are banning this, it's mostly a more move on their international relations and foreign policy, stating that, okay, we've done everything. that we can do. But honestly, with the VPN, with the existence of VPNs and other type of like techniques to obfuscate activity, there is very little a lot of people like anybody can do to do 100% ban.
It seems like with Web3 in this like new age we're living in, the governments are going to lose a lot of control over like what people are allowed to see and what they're not allowed to see. I know in the US it's always been very like, okay, the internet's like the Wild West. You can go and look at whatever you want. I know that big companies will censor certain creators on certain platforms for whatever reason. But I know that there has always been like a marriage between the media and the political establishment in the US. And now that this marriage is becoming very unstable because of the introduction of this new player, which is the internet and independent content creators. A more decentralized way of getting information. So I feel like, you know, this technology is a public good, right? I think it's drawing power away from those that have had it for a long time, and it's giving it to new people, and this is going to create something different. I'm not sure what it's going to lead to, but
no, that is the reason it's very interesting, because essentially how you said, that is the reason a lot of people are calling Web3 Bitcoin as disruptors, because there has been an industry standard, and like with the inclusion, like internet was the first wave, like Web 1, Web 2, it was like the first wave, and with Web 3 it's become a little bit more disruptive. But on the other hand, a lot of centralized institutions are very interested in these technologies. For example, in 2022 in January, I was part of the International Blockchain School. It was organized by the University of Copenhagen and the IT University at Copenhagen. So in the hackathon, I worked with the Danish Central Bank, which like is the most centralized institution, like financial institution in Denmark. So they were interested in like the capacity of, how do you say, Bitcoin and blockchain to help reduce their operational load. So if you talk about decentralized finance, so a lot of financial entities that are centralized are interested in this, because what they want to do is, obviously they don't want to lose all the power, but they understand, okay, this new thing is coming in. A lot of people are accepting it. A lot of people are protesting for it. So they knew the status quo is going to change. So what a lot of smart centralized entities are doing, they are looking at how can they actually incorporate this in their status quo. So that is the reason I find it very interesting when governments, when centralized financial institutions, they start talking about blockchain, they start talking about Web3.
To me, it just seems like very much the future in a lot of ways. Like, I can't see that, like, you know, physical money going anywhere. Maybe not for decades, or even like the U.S. dollar, like in itself, is not going to go anywhere. But I can definitely see, you know, these currencies kind of picking up steam. You know, and depending on what people are getting. You know, obviously there's use for this in like illicit trade, things like that. But I guess, you know, one of the things I'm really passionate about is education. I want to see, you know, this get put to use for, you know, the nation's youth. Like, I think, like ChatGPT, for example, that's like a new thing to burst onto the scene. It's really good. I used it a few times, almost like a search engine. And at one point, I asked it to compile the number of representatives in each state for their state houses. So, for example, like, how many representatives are in New Hampshire's state house, like not in the federal government, but in their own state. And then I asked it to take those numbers and like direct it to a, you know, what's the ratio of like representatives to population, and it put everything in a chart for me in less than 2 minutes. And my whole point is, like, I would have had to sit there and research this for like an hour and then make my own chart and then do the math myself. Or, I mean, I'm sure there's websites with the information there, and it got a few things wrong. I had to tell it, like, oh, this number is incorrect. But, you know, by and large, the program's working, and when it starts to be able to look at images, you know, like you can even have image enhancements. You know, you could make movies with this thing. Like, the future. What I see in the future with this thing is is unlimited potential, you know?
No, precisely. I mean, like, if you've been like following, I think so. This got popular on social media. So, like, the technology is already there. So, in terms of image enhancement and making movies, so I think so. GPT-4 did this. It created. I don't know if like, or it was some other AI agent. It created Harry Potter, but it's basically set in a fashion standpoint.
Okay.
So it was completely bizarre. A lot of people got very excited by it because the entire thing was created by an AI.
Yeah.
And in terms of education, why I think it's really, really helpful for students, because a lot of people are talking about, okay, you cannot write essays and everything by chat GPT. But as you stated, that you have like these little things that you need to do for research, talking about correlation of your data, talking about basic things. For example, I do this on a very daily basis. I'm working on my thesis right now. Checking out citations and keeping them everything like in one format, it's very difficult.
Yeah, it is.
ChatGPT does it for you very easily. So you can just like send the entire source material, and you can ask GPT to basically be like, convert this into APA, convert this into MLA. It does it by itself.
Yeah, and it'll just make the whole thing.
Exactly. It just makes it easier for a lot of students to basically do these kind of secondary tasks which do not require any intellectual stimulation. They just like, you know, how we call it like everyday, like there is a word, I'm like, it's blanking, but basically like mindless labor. You don't need to put any reasoning behind it. And basically because of that, I think so GPT is the amount of potential it has to help students for basic research or day-to-day or like homework activities is immense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is going to change education, you know, a lot. I mean, I think you're always going to need a teacher. I really do. I think teachers do more than just teach sometimes. Like they kind of guide you in a way that even ChatGPT might not be able to do, because it's not a human being yet, but or like some robot, you know, someday. But I'm saying that you know, I was a very curious person when I was, you know, growing up. I wanted to know in things, and I would actually find myself reading about science and technology and the things I was talking about earlier that I saw on YouTube. I find myself reading about that, and even today I find myself asking ChatGPT. You know, as another example, one thing I'd like it to do someday with the images, I'm sure it's coming soon, is on a Rogan podcast, they were talking about how this group of Japanese researchers were trying to figure out the most efficient way for transport networks in Tokyo to operate. So like the subway systems, like where should they stop, where should they go? If we were going to build one, how should it look with the city sprawl? And they used some sort of fungus to determine, and the fungus grew in the most efficient method through like the city, the city that they set up. And then they used this data to determine, you know, what the subway system in Tokyo should look like.
That's interesting.
Now, you could apply this model to every city in the world. I mean, you wouldn't even need the actual fungi. You could just get the properties of it and then ask ChatGPT to look at a map and then do the same thing. Might not be as accurate because it's, you know, again, like it's a work in progress, but the potential is very much there. To the point where, you know, if you're a business person and you need a secretary, this could be a secretary someday. You could be like, hey, I want you to put on my calendar a meeting, and it'll be able to do it. So
yeah, exactly. So as exactly you stated in both of the use cases, firstly, the business use case, GPT has already been like, I don't know if Microsoft bought it, but in Teams, there is a plugin of GPT. So there are things, I forgot the name, but there are things you can basically ask the GPT to all this transcription, make like keynotes for this, make my calendars for this. So like GPT is going to do that. And the secondly, the transport use case you stated, which was very interesting. I've never ever heard of like somebody modeling it based on like a fungi growth or something. But this brings to my original point as a public good. You have like these public infrastructures like transport, you have energy consumption, the amount of things you need for energy distribution. Using technology for this at one point of time is going to be like, it's going to be like so obvious, a lot of people won't even think about it. as of now, how we are using the internet, like on a day-to-day basis, a lot of people don't understand what is happening on the background. Like for me as a cybersecurity professional, I do that on a day-to-day basis. I check what is happening on the background. But a lot of people, to use the internet, they don't require it. They don't require the knowledge. And at one point of time, the same thing is going to be for cryptocurrencies and blockchain. People won't be, they won't be needing the knowledge for it. And I'm just like waiting for that thing to happen. For example, if you take one of my favorite use cases for blockchain, for example, NFTs. Okay, it's basically you go. This is very popular in the United States of America. If you go to a DMV, it takes hours to process your documents. It takes hours for them to actually validate and authenticate the information that you're giving them. With NFTs and blockchain, 1 minute. That's done. They'll be able to authenticate it because they'll know the system and the information that is being stored on the blockchain cannot be changed, so it is authentic. So the amount of like use cases for public good is, I'm really excited for this.
Yeah, me as well. And I can think of, public transport, education, healthcare, all of these things, AI assisted, computer programs having, I feel, again, like you're always going to need a surgeon, I think, until there's a point where you have a machine that is more knowledgeable of the human body, knows your case specifically, and then can operate in the most meaningful way. But I think it's going to be a public good, but it's also going to disrupt a lot of people's livelihoods. And, things are going to change, and I think that a lot of jobs that people have are not going to be so important in 20, 30, 40 years, depending on how far this AI goes, and how smart it gets in its ability to recognize information and then kind of like put it together.
I completely understand that, but because this has been very popular, a lot of people are stating AI will basically render this job useless. You won't have this job. I kind of have like a contrary belief to that.
Okay.
What I think it's that I don't think so AI will replace any job. It'll give a possibility of the person who's having this job to do it more efficiently.
I see.
Exactly what you stated. Like at the end, a lot of people are saying like copywriters would not exist because like AIs can do that. But what I believe smart copywriters will do, they would use AI to basically make their product unique so that they can actually stand out. So that is what I'm believing in, because a lot of, as exactly you stated, even if you talk about an AI in healthcare and surgeries, you'll require a surgeon. The amount of mental calculation a surgeon does like on a off-second basis is very important.
Yeah, of course.
And even if you talk about like right now the technology we have in terms of GPT, it's not that high level.
It's not there yet. And I would agree with you and say that I don't think there are things that you can program. I think that
exactly.
Sometimes you need that human kind of touch there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's why I think it's the reason I'm very excited about this is the efficiency will increase. AI is going to increase the efficiency. However, what happened 2 weeks ago when Bill Gates and Elon Musk and other industry leaders wrote an open letter to the AI industry to asking them to basically stop the production. So which was very interesting. What do you like? Have you heard about that?
I know that there's like competition going on between Microsoft, Google. Who is ChatGPT owned by?
OpenAI.
OpenAI,
yes,
which is is it owned by anybody? Or
no, it's a different company as of now.
Okay, so this open letter you just talked about, is that they want them to stop it because they're not sure what's going to happen with it, or they're not? I'm assuming that they wrote this letter because they got caught with their pants down.
That's true.
And they have no competition like
exactly.
They were down here.
Exactly. Because see, a lot of people are stating that they are being like the letter stated that it's very scary. So we need to like not stop but check our growth. But my point of view, based on so much amount of research, like I'll ask you as well. So what my understanding is, the technology we see in the public forum that is accessible to the users, and the technology that governments have, that military have, it's 10 times better. It's 10 times more advanced. So if you just imagine what you can do with GPT right now, I can't even imagine the amount of technology that the US government and the US military is right now having.
Yeah, of course.
I'm pretty sure it's better than the GPT that we're using right now.
Yeah, and you just reminded me of how the original internet was, classified pretty
Exactly.
much and only used by scientists. So I'm sure that they're light years ahead of wherever we're at.
Yeah, so that's the reason, like, the open letter was, as Eustace stated, they just want to, like, halt production, they want to halt competition and everything. But still, it's the entire thing is very interesting because it's so speculative. A lot of, like, even if you take cryptocurrency, for example, the reason that I think in terms of financial assets, it's still very dangerous because it's so, like, it changes so much.
Yeah.
If you compare it to, like, real-time assets, like if you take real estate or like the US dollar,
Yeah.
even if you can make an argument that because of inflation, the dollar is also changing a lot, but it's not as speculative.
Yeah, of course not. We're kind of reaching the end here. I
Okay.
don't know if you have any final thoughts. It's okay if we go a few minutes over, but I don't know if there's anything you wanted to say.
No, the thing is, it brings me back to my original point, is that technology as a public good is going to become so ubiquitous that at one point of time, a lot of people won't even think about the amazing amount of information that they're processing because it's just going to be so passive.
Yeah.
So, and that is something that excites me because it gives chance for creating new products, to make more companies, to creating more values to the society.
All right. Well,
Perfect.
all I have to say is thank you for coming on. This
Thank
has
you
been
so
a
much
very
for having
informative
me.
episode.
Thank you so much for
Thank you,
having me.
guys. Check out episode 33 next. And cheers. Thank you. Bye-bye.